Who's our speaker? So our speaker is Joseph Merlino, whose connection with Villanova goes back to the 1990s. Back when Fritz Hartman was chair, Fritz Hartman and I were co-PIs of a grant, MSPGP, with 7 colleges and how many schools?
That was Math Science Partnership of Greater Philadelphia. It was 13 colleges and universities and 45 school districts.
Yeah, so it was a big, big thing. And then Joe kept getting more grants, and Michael Posner is very sad he can't be here today because Mike Posner worked on 2 or 3 grants with you, several grants. So we have a lot of connections with Villanova. And recently, Joe and Deborah published a book, and a few months ago I got it and I read it and said, wow, this is worth talking about. So I'm really excited to have Joe here to tell us some of the main insights he got in this book, which is in our library. We're going to the library, so you can read it afterwards. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Whenever I make a presentation in mixed company, by that I mean teachers and professors, I always ask as an icebreaker, what's the most important discipline? And as you can imagine, get a lot of fun conversations about what the physics people think is important about their discipline and what math people think. Of course, what people think is important has to be very subjective, because if it wasn't important to them, then they wouldn't be in it. But in terms of mathematics, at least publicly, math is considered, along with reading, perhaps the most important. It's not necessarily because of the intrinsic value of math, but rather because math is a proxy for other things. For example, ranking to get into college, SATs, scholastic ranking in high school. So parents value math greatly, not necessarily students. So Bob talked about the Math Science Partnership of Greater Philadelphia, and we had about 45 high schools. In one of the high schools, we did a survey of the students, and we asked them 3 questions. We said, if math were a color, what would it be and why? If it was an animal, what would it be and why? And if it was a food. So in this mixed company, because we have some education, how many education? 1, 2.
And what online? What on Zoom?
What comes to mind, if I could ask the mathematicians, what might come to mind to you for a food or an animal or a color?
That's a good food for math.
What's that?
Pizza.
Pizza, why?
You got radius, you got a circle, you got pepperonis and circles.
And you like pepper.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we asked students, we had 1,300 students that we asked, and we had 2 raters, 2 people who rated the responses on a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being, joyful, fantastic, and 1 being, I hate it. So I'd like to share with you some of the reactions. And we published this with a math guy from Delaware named Jim Fakai. I don't know if you remember Jim Fakai. So here's one response. Purple is my favorite color. It's my birthstone. Plus, it brings passion. That's how they feel about math. Another person was a little bit kind of in between. Math is like steak because math is full, expansive subject. However, like steak, there's tough bits of crystals scattered throughout the obstacles we must work around. Full meal is satisfying, but the process of eating is somewhat unusually strenuous.
What grade level were these students?
These were high school.
I get it, Nate. Yeah.
Another one says, vegetables are good for you. You need it in life. Some people like it. Some people don't. That we would score a 3. For an animal, math would be like a mosquito. Because whenever you do to try to get away from it, it always comes back. It's annoying because you hate taking math every year. And whatever you try to do to stop it, it always fails. That we would rate up to 1. Okay? But here are some others. You mentioned pizza. One woman said, young lady said, math would be like a lion because it's the king of all subjects. That would be a 5. But another said, for our color, it would be midnight blue because as hard as I try, I can never see the light. And yet another one said, if math were an animal, it would be a wolverine ready to slash my brains. What I found in talking to students and seeing the classrooms is very passionate responses to math, either positive or negative, somewhat. My wife, who is a personal chef, I asked her the questions, and she says, if it was a food, it'd be like beans. I hate beans, but yet I cook them for everyone. So she cooks me a lot of beans, but she never eats them. So this is kind of what the distribution looked like. With ones, hence this light, 1,300. See what the distribution was. So whenever I go into a classroom or whatever I suggest to teach a course is to sort of survey students as to what their affective disposition is to whatever subject they have. Because that affectations of that affective domain can either help or hinder their reception of their content knowledge. So one of the biggest lessons, we had 200 districts, or sorry, 45 districts, 200 schools. We were trying to improve math and science instruction through this big grant. It was a $14 million grant, and we had lots of people doing professional development of teachers. One of the big lessons that we learned was that purpose matters. Whenever I go into a math classroom and I would talk to the math teacher, I would say, why are you teaching? It was an algebra teacher. I would say, why are you teaching algebra 1? Well, you need it for algebra 2. Why are you teaching algebra 2? You need it for trig. Why trig? You need it for SAT. I said, there's no trig on the SAT. One of the things is when you ask the teachers why are they teaching cellular biology or why are you teaching linear equations, to give an answer that motivates students as to why they need to learn this. It was very difficult for them to answer that question. And it was also difficult for the students to answer, why are you learning this stuff? They would say, well, it's because it's on the test. So we found that purpose that is relevant to the times and meaningful to students is really critical to learning. We also found that STEM is initially was thought of as science, technology, engineering, and math as 4 separate disciplines. We viewed STEM as fundamentally integrative. That is, the cosmos as a whole is not separated into separate disciplines, but is as a whole presents itself in an integrated way, either the man-made world or the natural world. And that project-based learning, however, and one of the people would talk about project-based learning, that is the need projects. But even Dewey and others have noted that you can't just do projects after projects. There has to be a whole purpose, and where does this go? So there needs to be an overarching purpose or direction to cohere multiple projects at the same time, right? Okay. So that's where we were. And there is evidence of purpose-driven learning. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's in the slideshow. And I have references for how purpose-driven learning, influences, test scores, etc. And I have references in the back there. And there can be different levels of meaning of purpose at the national level or at the university level or your departmental level. I'm just going to go through this here. And they can be done at the classroom level as well in terms of defining the purpose. So every institution wrestles with its mission. There's a mission here. They're Augustinian based, which are overarching. So our project went from 2003 to 2012. While we were ending our math science partnership, there was a revolution happening in Egypt. The Arab Spring, January 2011. It actually started in Tunisia when a guy set himself on fire a year before, started the revolution. Here's Tahrir Square, which is right in the center of Cairo, and these are all the people that protested. There were millions of them. They seem familiar. So a few months later, I get a phone call out of the blue from the International Visitors Center. Now, I'm from South Jersey, so I'm really local. And our project was in Jersey. We had 14 districts in Jersey, also in the Philadelphia area. So I'm really grounded in, I don't even have a passport. But I got a call from the International Visitors Center saying there's a delegation from Egypt that wants to come here to learn about STEM. Now, I had just finished the Math Science Partnership, so I had all kinds of connections. And this was the Minister of Education, and this was his deputy, and that's me and Deborah Pomeroy. So they came for a week, and I showed them around, connecting them to different places. And then they came to our office. I showed them Science Leadership Academy, you may be familiar with that, SLA in Philadelphia. They loved this. This is a high school in Philly. Then they came to our office, and we had just done all these projects. And so this is a delegation here. This is a woman from USAID. This is all of their staff here. And these are our staff surrounding the room. And we're talking about what we learned from a Math Science Partnership. We had 5 presentations and kind of a dog and pony show, but they were very impressed. They were very impressed with Philadelphia as well. Terrifically impressed. So they wanted to start a school as a new model for education. They just had a revolution. They wanted an educational revolution. And they wanted to have a model school that would be very different. That's why they came to Philadelphia, to learn how to do that. So I'm talking to the minister, and I say, he says, I want to open a school. I said, well, do you have a curriculum? He said, no. This is in August of 2011. I said, have you trained your teachers? He said, no. I said, do you have any materials? No. In fact, we just fired our principal. I said, well, when are you opening your school? He said, next month. So I said, good luck, Your Excellency. You have a big job ahead. As he was leaving my office, he helped all of us, whispered in my ear, I'll see you in Cairo. Thinking to myself, really? I don't even have a passport. I've never been to Cairo. I've never been really outside of this area. So I find myself in Cairo 4 months later with 2 of my colleagues. And we were on what's called a short-term contract, strength and needs assessment, to determine what were the needs of the school, which was already operating without a curriculum, without trained teachers. These are the mosques, pyramids. So we arrive in Egypt. That's where we stayed, the Marriott on the Nile. And the first thing that we get escorted to is in the interior of the Ministry of Education. Now, the Ministry of Education is a national system of 20 million students in the heart of Cairo. As soon as we get there, we were told that the minister that you saw here, he had left. There was a new minister. But we were taken to his office, and this guy, who I pointed out to you, was explaining to the minister about the new school that they wanted to start. And the idea of the new school is that it would be exempt from all regulations. No national exams, no standards. It was going to be from the dust up to create something new. And he pointed to us saying, and these guys are going to help us do it. And I'm thinking, really? There were 3 of us there. So that's me. And I don't know if you remember Frederick Bartley from the Franklin Institute, VP for that. And these are some of the people we worked with. Well, this is the school that they were going to do. It was about 45 minutes outside of Cairo in Giza, in the Giza government. It was a former military training school, and they wanted to do residential schools because they wanted to select students from all over Egypt, the top 2%. Since it was in the middle of nowhere, really, it was going to be an all-boys school initially. So me and my 2 colleagues are waiting in the principal's office for Dr. Rada, who I showed you, to walk in. Now, this place, if you couldn't know it, but when I say it was in the middle of nowhere, it was like just dirt around. He walks in and he says, "Welcome to the dream." And we're thinking, really? What's going to happen here? So we begin working with the teachers. And remember I said that purpose matters? Here was a pristine opportunity, an unbelievable opportunity to redefine or to establish a purpose for a new school. Not only for a new school, but for a new system, because that's what they wanted to do. And so the first question I asked the teachers are, what's your dream for Egypt? Egypt was in the middle of a revolution. And what's your dream for the students? They gave a long list of things. We had them all over the wall. But one of the things they said was, we want to equip our students to solve our grandest challenges as a country. We want to prepare our students for that. I said, okay. The way we approached this, we did not have subjects in mind. We were not going to design this from the traditional subjects. We were going to start with the purpose first. And so we said, well, what are the grand challenges? If you walk off the plane in Cairo International Airport, it hits you right in the face. Climate change, arid areas, need for clean water, a lot of pollution, urban congestion, population growth, use of solar energy. These were all immediately relevant challenges that anyone in Cairo could see. Has anybody been to Cairo, by the way? It's an experience. Have you?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
I just went to Cairo in 2019 days after accident.
Did you try to cross the street?
Yeah. It's a very like tan environment. Everything is
Beige. Yeah,
beige.
yeah. So you would see amazing sights. Here would be a woman crossing. It would be like crossing the Blue Route with a kid, one kid in her arms, and another 2 kids walking. along the route crossing. That's how crazy things are, traffic congestion there. Anyway, that's what they said their grand challenges were. All right. So they didn't have a curriculum, so what were we going to do? Well, this is Jan Morrison, who runs the STEM ecosystem nationally, and she was big into capstone. She's a science person. She was going to show them how to do capstone projects, which they could do immediately. And so the first curriculum that we did for that first year was a series of capstone projects, basically big science projects. Meanwhile, we had to design the curriculum. So we convened a design studio in Cairo, consisting of about 60 people from teachers, university professors, and ministry officials. And we asked them, it was a 3-day workshop, and we asked them, here are the grand challenges here, and across here are traditional subjects. What I'd like you to do is to, if you're a physics or a math person, take each of these grand challenges and specify what kind of content you need in order to address that particular grand challenge. And it couldn't be things like algebra. It had to be very specific things, like linear programming, something like that. So we had 10 of our people go there. This is one of the persons that you saw before that was Stephen Conroy, in these small groups that were interdisciplinary and then mixed with were disciplinary and then interdisciplinary, come up with this list of items. Deborah then went back. Oh, one of the things we wanted to know was, is there any natural linear sequence to these grand challenges? That is, if you solve one grand challenge, that would help you then do others. And so we had them design a web map. This is one teacher's view of how these grand challenges interact. As you can see, there's anywhere here you could go into others as well. So how are you going to design a curriculum? How are you going to design a curriculum? Well, what we took, the design of the curriculum was to start with the grand challenges, then figure out were there themes, after you've got all of this data here, where there's any themes that emerged. And then from those themes, what were the big ideas that then became courses? From those courses, we had units and essential questions, and then learning outcomes. So we didn't start with the course, we started with the grand challenge. And from that derived the curriculum. So these were the themes that we came up with based upon the data that this design studio came up with. So if we're talking about math would be related to matter, form, and function. So one of the grand challenges was designing buildings. So we combined physics with trigonometry to understand how forces would hold up a building, for example. And the capstone was around that. So all of these themes, we had the content interwoven together. So this was chemistry. CH was chemistry, that was the first year, and this was the 5th learning outcome. And we wove this learning outcome here to see where it connected in biology and chemistry to biology in the 3rd year, 7th learning. So think of a carpet. Yes, that's what we designed. But the learning outcome, which was 1 to 3 weeks in length, was the unit that we used to make these connections. And so the way the curriculum was designed, that we didn't teach chemistry 1 year and then biology the next year or vice versa. We taught biology and chemistry the same week. All the 5 disciplines, math, geology, physics, chemistry, biology, were all taught the same week, not every day. this allowed us to connect bio with the biochemistry. Likewise, the math and physics went together. The result was that when students came, and these were very bright students, and it was a residential school because we had to do it from all over Egypt, they understood why they were there, what the purpose of the school was about. And the curriculum here was designed to be close enough together for them to make these connections. Wasn't perfect, but the synapses were close enough that they could make this interwoven connection. We also had to change the assessment system in parallel. The capstone projects were worth 60% of the grade in grades 10 and 11. In 12th grade, because there was no exit exams, we had to invent an assessment system. So we used the ACT, we used misconception inventories, like in math, we used calculus concept inventory. Capstone project was 20%, lab, research, etc. And that became the grading system for these schools. Initially we had a school for boys, and then in the second year we had a school for the girls. And girls started winning international competitions like never before in Egypt. There hadn't been any. So I like, how am I doing for time? Okay, good. I'd like to play just a short clip. Can I do that? And show you how the girls thought about, this is something that they produced. And how do I start this? Peter, can I? Or you can do a QR code yourself. Right here,
Is this just a
right here.
screenshot? Okay.
Left click. There it is. There we go. Can you turn up? This. Here. Let me get very loud. This is the Mahdi School, which is a section in In 2015, 2 years, we had a young lady, young girl named Yasmin Mustafa. And she went to the International Science and Engineering Fair. And she scored #1 in her category, which is environmental engineering. And when she came back from Egypt, she was considered a rock star. We named an asteroid after her. And they had never won in Egypt any time that they came in beyond 4th place. And these students started to win competition after competition, not only at ISEF, but all over the world. And it became a validation for the ministry to continue to fund these schools. Now we have 23 schools across Egypt that are supposed to be models for the country. Unfortunately, this was the first phase of the project. We had a $25 million, $30 million grant to do this school. And then we were a subcontractor. We later became a prime to a $25 million grant to extend these schools and also to do something at the higher education level. I'll tell you about that in a minute, and then what happened after that. So, can I move this? I'm not moving this. So you can imagine that what we had, very smart kids, and the problem that we had was that the teachers that we were getting to teach in these schools were traditionally prepared. We had to do a ton of professional development with these teachers, continually, multiple years, to get them, because they would often be, the kids would outperform them. In fact, what we had to do was give them a psychological test because they were used to a pharaonic approach to teaching, the Pharaoh approach. I say you do, not a student-centered approach. So we had to give them a psychological test. We also gave them a test of misconception test because often physics people, chemistry people would have misconceptions in their own discipline, and we couldn't have them teach students to pass along their misconceptions. So the criteria was that you couldn't score below the average of what the students scored. And we tested the students as well in these misconceptions. So in 2018, we were awarded a $24 million contract with USAID, United States International Development, to develop a 4-year undergraduate teacher preparation program that would supply teachers to these schools. This was Ain Shams University in Cairo, which is the oldest teacher preparation institution in Cairo. It's very famous. This is the administrative offices. It's a former British palace. And we recruited about 60 US faculty to develop courses, a new teacher education program. And so if you can imagine Villanova being part of this, what I did was say to the universities that participated in the projects, and we had Cal Poly, CSU, Fresno, Radiation Tech, Drexel, Temple. But I went to Cal Poly and I said, you're familiar with the schools. I want you to imagine a teacher preparation program with no courses. What would it look like? Now they sat there for 3 hours. It wasn't all a day, it was a several day workshop. And thinking about what that looked like. And finally, after a couple of days, they came up with a scheme of what that could look like. And this is what it looked like. They came up with this 8-strand approach to the teacher preparation program, which consists of 6 transdisciplinary courses, followed by 10 disciplinary. So the transdisciplinary courses took the place of 10 introductory courses. So rather than introductory calculus or introductory biology, you would instead do 6 transdisciplinary courses. And then you would go into your disciplines. You had data science and technology, STEM education. These were the education courses that were STEM related. This is student-centered stuff. Then this is stuff that Egypt had to do, like Arabic. We did practical experiences from first year on, and English, because all of these schools were in English. And then we did capstone projects every year for teachers. I did this for CSU Cal Poly. I went through this exercise at Cal Poly. I then went to California State University at Fresno and did the same thing. I asked them, would you like to hear what Cal Poly did? They said, no, we want to come up with our own system. So they did. Actually, it was very similar. Then we went to Drexel and we married the two, and that's what this came up with. We then took this to Cairo. We had all of the deans. We had 5 universities and 3 deans from each university: education, science, and engineering. And we said, do you want to be part of this program? And they all said yes. So we had 15 deans. And we gave them this program. They all agreed to it. Then we had to develop the courses within these. We developed 140 courses, new courses from the ground up that matched the high schools. We did this in collaboration with the professors there. And all the universities agreed to adopt the same courses at the same time. And we also did postgraduate, 40 courses. So we did 180 courses, and we did this in 4 years. The students, the first graduating class of the 4-year undergraduate class happened last year in June of 2025. 2025. You may remember that was a particularly tumultuous year, particularly in January of 2025, as a new administration came in. You may have heard of Doge. Well, Doge dismantled all of USAID worldwide, including our program. Fortunately, we were at the end of it. However, we were about to go after a $50 million grant with our partners to extend this program into all of the rest of Egypt, using this teacher preparation program in order to supply the teachers to teach in these schools. So the concept was we would have one system with 2 components, a senior high school component and a teacher preparation component. 2 would work hand in glove. That's where we are right now. And our folks in Egypt, we've been managed to keep them alive, but the end of April will be probably the last that we can support them. We don't know what will happen after that. So just to note how we thought of the transdisciplinary courses, I'm just going to, is that if you think of the courses in college or a department or the topics within a course, and you see things like that from the student perspective can see things like this. Our goal was to design something so that they would see things like that. That's what we mean by transdisciplinary. That interconnectedness, the gestalt, if you will, of learning. These are the grand challenges that were matched. This is the Faculty of Education at Ain Shams University, which is a university of 220,000 undergraduates, another 20,000 graduates. Here, if you click on this, you will see the entire program, and with it, how we constructed the courses. Every course had a course rationale. you just didn't have calculus, you just didn't have the biology. You started with, what is your rationale? What's your purpose for teaching this course? How does it relate to the student interest? So it had to be justified. It wasn't just a topic. And from there, we designed out so here we had a template for this, course rationale, or issue, how is it relevant to the big ideas. We had a whole template pulling this out. And this is online, it's available to you. So you can see all the courses. Some of these syllabus is like 19 pages long. And how we constructed that. This was done in collaboration with the Egyptians. We trained about 1,000 professors. Each got about 150 hours of professional development because they themselves were trained in a Pharaonic way, right? So you can't train the pre-service teachers to be student-centered unless your professors were also trained. And so we did a lot of training with them, professional development with them, with our university colleagues here in the U.S., with professional learning communities, and a lot of visits there. Fortunately, we got in just in time before everything shut down. So anyway, that's what my presentation's about. Thank you. And I was told to end at 2:45, so there'd be questions, and I think it's exactly 2:45. Yeah.
I mean, you guys do think that they could.
Maybe Villanova.
That's, by the way, that's what I wrote. It was published by Roman Littlefield. Now, it's an academic book. Fortunately, it's too expensive. Fortunately, no, I don't.
Find that mentioned that a number of US faculty were involved in working on the curriculum for the teacher preparation. Did you have an opportunity to study to what extent it may have impacted how they are thinking about their own teacher preparation? That was what did they learn from participating in the project?
Yeah, so for example, one of the things we used was learning system model. Was from Colorado, Valerie Otero. And then we brought Valerie to Paris to train. And we had other folks that were doing the learning system model. They took back things that they learned in Cairo. Everyone there, everyone who participated and came to Cairo left learning more than they gave. So they did, like the problem was they're individuals. They're in a big institution where you don't have a critical mass to make a change. Here, we had the support of all the deans and a support from an outside entity, Ministry of Higher Education, support this whole thing. So it was like an envelope where people could do this. Yeah.
Do you have any examples of how these courses incorporated math or statistics?
Yes.
Or they don't have the traditional count one, count two, count like that.
No. So if you go online, if you Google this, Peter, can you help me for a moment?
Go to the web.
I want to go to that right here. Yep. Let me just show you this. here. This is all in English, by the way. Click on that. Now, let's go down. Go down. We have a transdisciplinary. Here we go. Here are the transdisciplinary courses. And we had, so what we did, these are the 6 main transdisciplinary courses here. But then in the electives, we also try to incorporate a transdisciplinary concept within, like, chaos and fractals, which is the math course, games and learning tools. So you can go here and you can see how we incorporated calculus into, and first year into all of these courses. Now, the idea is that, you know, people learn one thing in 1 year and forget it, right? So the idea of these transdisciplinary courses would be to have it memorable, so you wouldn't forget. And you could allow yourself to tie it to other things. That is that gestalt we want to use. That was the whole idea. We don't know how these teachers who just graduated are doing in the classroom because we were shut down. But we're now applying for a Spencer Foundation grant, for Spencer. We were invited to submit a proposal, not a big one, that would track these teacher graduates into the classroom and see how they did. The proposal was due March 31st. And we have a couple people, we have 2 of our colleagues in Egypt working on it and 2 here in the US. Yes.
So that's an awful lot of stuff in one class. Do you have like team teaching of this stuff or anything like that? Because I don't really understand how one person's.
No. In the transdisciplinaries, it's usually three people.
Okay.
And they'll take turns. So they haven't worked it out for contractual reasons. So one may teach the first couple of weeks and the other one. Yeah, it is a lot. What we try to do, and I don't know, can you scroll up a little bit?
But then like each individual student in the class is a teacher, right?
I'm sorry?
This is a class for teachers, right?
Yes.
So you have multiple teachers teaching the teachers, but each teacher in the class has to somehow become kind of semi-expert in all that. It just seems pretty different.
No. What we would have, let's say, we would have a physics guy teach the physics part of this, and we have a biology person teaching the biology part.
But then if I'm a teacher trained by taking this class, I would master all of that.
So typically, a new teacher would come in and have 5 introductory courses, regardless of their major. So if they were majoring in chemistry, they would have to take 2 biology courses, 2 physics courses, 2 math courses, 10 courses altogether. So we swap that out for 6 transdisciplinary. That's
Basically, content
packaged differently. But
big question.
you think of the tic-tac-toe, the idea is you, by rearranging it, you achieve an efficiency of memory. Or you didn't do that before. So we have 5 majors. We have math, biology, chemistry, biology majors. So each discipline, we develop not only these 140 courses, but each of the programs were for biology. But all of them took the transdisciplinary courses. Because when we get into the classroom, we wanted to break down the silos. With a student, we wanted them to think in terms of the complexity of the world. is not just limited to biology. Biology, chemistry. So not that you're going to become expert in everything, but at least you have some awareness that it connects. For example, one of the things we did in one of the courses was transdisciplinary course is explore how energy is interpreted through different disciplines. Energy looks differently in biology than it does chemistry than it does. So we want to explore that as a theme.
So from a Zoom participant, Teresa Wojcik, I apologize if I'm pronouncing the name incorrectly. She's the chair of the education department.
Yeah.
First, she just commented what you're describing is a bit like our MSE, mental science experience courses at Villanova, or kind of blend stuff. But she also had a couple of questions. We have talked about secondary schools where corresponding changes made in the curriculum at the elementary level. Changes in how lessons were taught, student-centered or teacher content focused, or structured, disciplinary versus disciplinary.
So our project was just at the senior high school level, although we did do stuff at the middle school to start. Egypt was pretty rigid. They did do another project through another grant that began with the elementary. But there were 40 programs in Egypt at the time when we left, and all of them were shut down. So we never got to go in. Like, one of the questions we had was, can we do this in a non-residential setting? That was a big question. Because the whole idea was a proof of concept. Can we actually do this in terms of the curriculum? So that was one thing. The other thing we wanted to know was, can we do it with non-high achieving students? Can we do it with just regular students? What would that look like? And then how would it look at if we moved it down to the middle grades? Yes.
The question challenge as a nation. What do they get? In other words, are there positions for them? I'm just thinking for graduate.
Yeah.
So you're designing a curriculum to solve this problem.
So
How do you,
there are many of, almost all of the graduates of these schools have gone on to higher education. Either in Egypt, but mostly also in Europe and the United States. In fact, we've had a dozen or more here in this area. Swarthmore, Penn, Bryn Mawr. One student was in Bryn Mawr, a woman, and she graduated, went to computer science, and now is working for Microsoft in Seattle. Another guy is doing his PhD at Princeton in biomechanical aerospace, using birds as a model for flight. They have another one is doing mechanical engineering. So they moved on to their interest. But this girl from Bryn Mawr said, I asked her, how was it like to come from Egypt to the US? She said it was difficult, but I'm used to difficult. And what I learned is to overcome that, to problem solve. And whatever problem I have, by the way, they have a bond with each other. They call themselves STEMers. They've all had that same experience, and it wasn't always pretty. These residential schools sometimes didn't have a roof. There was leaking water, or they had problems with food. So they've overcome a lot. That's what we're trying to do. But it's been just, if you could see these students and have them present what they did as a dean from Drexel School of Education remarked when she saw them, my God, these students are doing upper undergraduate. They are really, really amazing. And I just wish that our students here would focus more on our grand challenges and less about their own personal investment. But what can they do as exceptional students in a leadership role to help our country move forward, to solve some of our problems? Anyway. So I live in Lansdowne, not too far away. And my father, by the way, my late father went to Villanova when it was a college. First in his class. I mean, he wasn't the first in his class, first in his family to go to college. So I'm really happy to be here at Villanova. Anything else? Any other questions?
There's another question. Could we go on to the point, take us back to philosophy of education. What is the broader purpose of school for individual or societal / national goals? Commenting on.
Okay, in my book, I talk about this. It's not for me to tell you. We did is have a process for determining, but it begins with the aspiration for your country, for your community. What does that look like? And from that aspiration, then your graduates should grow into that. That then defines. So the Egyptians said, we want to solve our grand challenges as a country, and we want our students to be able to help us do that. From that, we got the purpose. Here, purpose can look very different. We are a pluralistic society. Become more so. Right? All kinds. How do we live together? What does that look like? What kind of vision do we have for our country? Is it Christian nationalism? Or is it something different? And if that's the case, then what does our educational system look like? And what does the curriculum have? We don't have to use the same curriculum that we've done all the time. In fact, what I recount in this book is that there's been 13 different purposes of education since the founding of back in 1620. We don't have to stick with what we have.
You want to talk about Bosnia, how they look at it very differently?
Well, just real quick, because I know we're getting late. We got an invitation from Save the Children to help them with a similar project, Bosnia and Herzegovina, that just came out of post-conflict. You know, the terrible genocide that happened there. And for them, because they are so geographically divided, their purpose in education was to be able to have peace and employment without it being tied to a certain geography. So for them, they wanted to be trained in a knowledge-based economy that would not be tied to a particular area. So we did the same thing. We said, well, what are your knowledge-based sectors? So they listed 10 sectors. We did it in conjunction with 3 universities in Bosnia and Herzegovina. They did the work. We just showed them how to do it. We had 9 of our people do it. We said, these are your key, they came up with 10 key sectors. We said, what's the knowledge that is involved with those sectors? So agriculture, what's the knowledge involved with agriculture? And then what's the specific topics that you need for that knowledge? So they came up with a matrix. And in this case, it was K to 13. And they developed the whole curriculum. I know you got to leave. Yeah. Thank you. Come.